So, how are we doing, guys? Welcome to Cowboys Beat Live with Space Cowboys, or is it Cowboys Beat Live? I
It's
always just start
it's
off my
spell
intros like that.
Space Cowboy Media, of course.
It's Space Cowboys Beat Live. I like that better because I always start all my intros out with that because it's just like muscle memory at this point. But
Right,
yeah, Space Cowboys Live or Space Cowboys Beat Live. That's what I like that. Whenever we do that, we'll do it like that.
right, of course.
How are you doing, my friend? It's a beautiful Sunday morning. Uh,
Uh yeah, I'm doing
the
good.
work week started for you today, right?
Correct. I go in later, but these Cowboys just oh my god, man.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I
Well, there's a
know.
lot to talk about, but there's not a lot to talk
Right,
about.
exactly. So it's kind of like whatever.
So, I mean, yeah, let's get into that,
Yeah.
right? Like, let's get into um, what people have been talking about a lot over the offseason, which is
Mhm.
the fact that the Cowboys have yet to extend Dak, CD, and Micah, along with their inactivity and free agency. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, it's been very annoying to say the least. I think that if I understood what the plan was, I can have a little bit more clarity and have conversations about it. But the fact that they're so indecisive of what they want to do when you're in an off season where that's the last thing you should be doing is the worst thing imaginable. I think that them waiting is not helping their cause. But we understand that's how they conduct business, even though it's the dumbest thing they could ever do. But nah, man, I just think it's stupid. I don't care if they want to bring these guys back or they want to re-sign them. It's just you need to pick a lane and stick to it instead of trying to like blow smoke up everybody's rear end and be like, we're trying to do something, but you really don't want to do something. So,
Well, my biggest problem with this, right? Like, I am not big on going and spending a ton of money in free agency. That's not
right.
what I prefer this team to do. But
Hmm.
I love the addition of Eric Kendricks. Love that addition. Go make three or four more additions like that on top of re-signing Tyron Smith, on top of re-signing Jonathan Hankins, on top of re-signing Stephon Gilmore. And even though they lost in the first round, you want to know what I would say? This
Mm.
team's better, and I feel really damn good about this team because, like, another thing that I will say is I don't love them keeping Mike McCarthy just
Hmm.
because that game was so egregious and they looked so unprepared for that game
Hmm.
that I thought you needed to move on. So to me, there's not really much to be excited for because, all right, you have the same coach that we saw his team was unprepared for that big playoff game. We
Hmm.
have Mike Zimmer, who, like, I'm very excited for him. But at the same time, like, when it comes to, keeping Mike McCarthy, I understand, like, their reasoning behind it. Dak had a great year. The offense was very effective. But at the
Hmm.
same time, Dak's been good with pretty much every coordinator, every coach that you put with him. So I'm not afraid to move on from a coach like that and go get a Ben Johnson, who I think would have been a great fit for this football team. Knowing what Ben Johnson did with Jared Goff, Dak
Hmm.
Prescott is a superior quarterback to Jared Goff. He just is. Jared Goff is a lot more limited than Dak Prescott, in my personal opinion. If you put Ben Johnson on this team, you add a few pieces to this team. Like I said, re-sign the guys I wanted them to re-sign. Add a Kendricks. Add some other pieces to your team. I would feel great about this football team because I think that, and you went and you re-signed your guys. I'd feel great about this football team. But there's so many things that I think that they messed up on over the course of the offseason that, I mean, like, I think they're going to be a good team. I think they'll win 10 to 12 games somewhere around there because I think that their stars are so good and they play at such a high level consistently that they'll be able to win regular season games. But I don't want to win regular season games. I've seen that. I've seen that every year. I want to win a
Right.
Super Bowl.
I mean, man, that's how it's been. Is there the Overton window has shifted in Dallas before with Garrett? It was can we just get to the playoffs and have a chance? Now that we've been to the playoffs consistently, we've gotten our expectations a lot higher, which I know for me at least, it's always been Super Bowl or bust. Point blank period. Like you can't tell me otherwise. Like sure, it would be nice to go to a conference championship game and have a chance, but you know what would happen? We get there, We lose, and then everyone's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter if you don't make it to the Super Bowl. And then even if we made it to the Super Bowl, well, it doesn't matter until you win it. So, but my thing is that I completely agree with you. I think that if this front office added like 3 or 4 guys on an Eric Kendricks like level with how much they lost, we would be in a much better position. Like, I understand with the offensive line, they have faith in guys like TJ Bass and Brock Hoffman, who I like. I really like these guys. But my problem is that now you got to replenish the depth again. And that's what bugs me so much about this Cowboys team.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you know, here's the thing when it comes to this team. The reason why the fan base is upset is not because we think this is going to be a bad team. I don't think a lot of the fan base thinks that this is going to be a bad team. Like, obviously there are the extreme guys where it's like, oh, we're gonna go 3-14. Dak sucks. McCarthy sucks. Jerry Jones sucks. Which most the people that they say suck, most of them is true. Most of them. But yeah, you know, like, this team's won so many damn games over the past few seasons where it's like, all right, like, they don't suck. Like, there's McCarthy. My problem is just that we've seen this time and time again with him. I mean,
Right.
I saw him with a 14-1 Packers team lose in the divisional round with a quarterback that's way better than Dak Prescott. Way better. And that's no disrespect to Dak Prescott. Aaron Rodgers at his peak, one of the best quarterbacks that I've ever seen play. Like, when we talk about just playing the position, maybe the best I've ever seen play in his prime. Like, that's how good that quarterback was, and he had troubles winning with him. So, you know, I think that one thing that the fan base should be excited with is Mike Zimmer, because Mike Zimmer, he's not like Dan Quinn. He does not deal with penalties. He does not deal with blown coverage. He does not deal all that undisciplined nonsense that we've seen from this defense over, I'd say, like, last year, there were some games where it's just like, man, they got flat out exposed. And a lot of it was because of how undisciplined they were. Mike Zimmer's not dealing with that. He's not gonna be okay with that. And I feel like this defense, because I'm all about identities. I'm an identity-based person when it comes to the game of football. What is your identity? And you know, when things aren't going right, what do you lean on to get you through some of those slumps? And my problem was with the identity of the Cowboys defense over the past few seasons, it's how many takeaways can we get? How many times can we get to the quarterback? It's not, okay, let's play fundamentally sound football here. Let's just make sure that we're containing the offense and not making the bleeding get even worse. You know, it's like, all right, hey, we need to go make a play. We need to go make a play here. All right, Trayvon Diggs, go get overly aggressive and try and jump around. Oh, wait, they're going over the top for 40, 50 yards. You know, that to me, and I started to grow tired of Dan Quinn in the Green Bay Packers game in 2022. And I think you bring in a Mike Zimmer, and this defense is going to be more disciplined. You heard it in his mic'd up segment where he's like, I hate mistakes, man. I effing hate mistakes. And this guy has been a guy who coached the Vikings who were consistently bottom 10 in a good way, bottom 10 in penalties. So I think that this team, talent has not been the issue for this team over the past few seasons. The issue for the Dallas Cowboys has been they've been consistently undisciplined.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that it showcases in the postseason is that, and look, I said this several times on my channel as well as on Twitter or X, whatever we call it these days, that there's this weird consistency with the Cowboys when you get to the playoffs. Yeah, there's a different amplification to it, of course, because you have a single game elimination. It's not like other sports where you'll have another game that you can look forward to and think that, hey, we can win this series. And so there are moments where Dak seems like he's too amped up and he has to kind of calm himself down as you go through the nature of the game. And then you have CeeDee Lamb sometimes, like, well, this most recent game it was showcased, he was like getting in his own head, and then it feels like everybody's just in a cloud. It's like, this is where your coaches need to step up and be like, yo, relax, we're good. And I think when we had the game last year against Tampa Bay, with that game, it didn't start off smooth, like the first drive or two. But then you saw they got into a groove and things were working just fine. But the key thing is that they didn't get jumped on like they did with Green Bay. And that's where I think they got a problem. And this is where Mike McCarthy needs to do a better job of, like, I just don't like it when people want to fully blame the players without looking at the coaches and what their jobs are supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I don't know what else to say.
Oh no, I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. And it's like that's kind of been a consistent over the past few seasons here, where it's like there's big games, and even in the regular season, like the Bills game, they didn't look prepared. In the San Francisco 49ers game, they didn't look prepared. It's like, great, you look prepared against Philly. Guess what? Like, one, I think Philly, even when they were on that win streak, were kind of overrated. And not only that, it's like it's your division rival. You should get up for them.
Right.
Like,
I mean, they were, like, the thing is like with Philadelphia is, I wasn't the only one screaming this. Like, I think I said it, I think it was after they beat the Bills in overtime. I was like, dude, they're going to lose at some point. Like, it's just that winning model is unsustainable. And it's not like the Cowboys had those, like, glimpses of, like, oh my God, they're winning single possession games. Like that Minnesota Vikings team from 2022, where I think they set the record for most wins in, like, single game. It was like, what the hell? But I think the Cowboys, they had a great year given the moves they made. And this is kind of tying back into the offseason moves, is you look at what they did. They added a guy like Stephon Gilmore, and that paid dividends. You added a guy in Brandon Cooks, and that paid dividends. Now, they didn't add a little bit more, but that's the thing, is you're going out there. You're getting guys with draft capital, and that's fine with me. Like, I think that you don't need to go sign everybody. Of course, no one I've heard from Cowboys content creators on Twitter, like, no one is saying go sign everybody. What we're just saying, and I even said it, like, dude, they could do the bare minimum, which is just go sign a running back, go sign a linebacker, and I know they did that, but, like, go get guys that replenish what you lost, and I'll be fine. But, like, you only getting Eric Hendricks and Royce Freeman, that's not a move. Like, that's not, like, a needle mover for me. Like, we're talking about how, I'm, like, looking at the list here. You lose your starting running back, your starting tackle, your starting center. A lot of your defensive depth is gone. And that's what scares me about this team, is you're going into this draft basically just fingers crossed that you can hit on every single pick. But this is what the Cowboys do every single year, and last year they got screwed over because their draft class gave them nothing. So I don't know, man. It's just ridiculous. I don't know.
yeah, there is a lot of pressure on the scouting department in this draft. There's no doubt about it. And can they deliver? I think they can. But, until I see it, I got to see it. Like, I remember back in 2022 when they lost Amari, they lost Collins, they lost Gregory, they lost all these guys. And I think that was even more devastating than what we just lost recently, like how many guys we lost in that offseason. But they go in the 2022 draft, and I think that's one of the best drafts they've ever had. I don't think people talk about that draft enough, with getting Tyler Smith, with getting Jake Ferguson, Deron Bland, Williams and Tolbert are nice depth pieces. But then you also go and undrafted free agent. They got Damone Clark as well, who I think could be a starter. Well, I want to definitely dive into linebackers.
Sure.
I think he played out of position a little bit, a lot of it actually. You get a Marquise Bell, you get Wanye Thomas. Peyton Hendershot showed you some things. Like, they added a lot of players from that draft where it's like, oh man, like, this was a really good draft. Like, there's no doubt about it. And I think they need to repeat something like that. And I think they have the opportunity to do it. I think that there's going to be a lot of really nice players that can help this football team out in the position where they're at, both in the first, second, and third round. But again, I got to see it for me to believe it.
For sure. No, I completely agree. I think that, we are going to have a draft night where you're going to have plenty of guys on the board that can help you day one, and that's what you're going to need. I don't think they should force a pick. I think that if you have a plethora of options, don't be afraid to trade down. And I just don't want this team to pigeonhole themselves like they've been looking like they're going to do and how they've been talking. I understand people say, oh, it's a smokescreen. I mean, not really. They kind of tell you what they're going to do. And you look at how they handled it. I mean, it looks like they're going to go offensive line early. I don't know what position. There's a late push by the media to say that they're interested in a guy like Tyler Guyton, who I wouldn't be shocked if they took him in day one of the draft. Basically, and we'll talk a bit more about some of these prospects, but with a guy like Guyton, it's a very high upside guy, but he played on the right side of the offensive line. I mean, I like what he puts out, measurable wise and what you can see with him. But again, like, I need a guy that is not going to be that much of a project and can immediately start. And what I'm worried is the Cowboys are going to do the same things where it's like, okay, they'll get him. They'll get a hurt guy that like a Jonathan Brooks in round 2, which I like him, but we don't know how he's going to recover from that ACL injury. And we know that for the Garrett era, it was hamstrings, I think. Yeah, hamstrings. And then for the Mike McCarthy era, it's been ACLs and all this other crap. But no, man, I think that they have a chance to get a lot of good players, but they need to flex their draft muscles with their capital.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I put out a tweet yesterday. Let me pull this up because I do think it is a very interesting talking point. I tweeted at Brian Broadus about this. So how would you feel? Let me find this. So how would you feel if this is the draft, right? They go in the first round. They back up to pick, let's just say 30 or somewhere along there, and they pick up an extra third round pick. And with that pick, they pick Powers Johnson or Zach Frazier, one of those two. We'll get into whether it should be center or tackle after this, but let's just say those are the picks. And then in round 2, they either pick Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson. They then go in the third round and pick either Maurice Lauafew, the linebacker from Notre Dame, or Trevin Wallace, the linebacker from Kentucky. And then with their other third round pick, they pick McKinley Jackson, the one technique from Texas A&M, or Tavondre Sweat from Texas. How would you feel if those were the scenarios that we ended up, or those were the players that we ended up coming out of this draft with?
Oh, I would feel very comfortable with that, and I think that if that's the case, then what you need to do with Mozzie is you need to make a decision on what you want to do with him. Like, do you want him to go with 3 tech? Because, you have Osa who's entering the final year of his contract, so you need to really figure out what you're trying to do with Mozzie, or you want to just have a dude for depth purposes with 1 tech. I'm a big fan of Zach Frazier and Jackson Powers Johnson. I do think his medicals are being a bit overstated in the sense of, like, I'm not saying there's no problems, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of times people hyperfixate on certain medicals, and some people be like, oh, you're being a hypocrite because you're talking about Jonathan. Well, it depends on the position, number one, and number two, what you look at in their history. And I think that for Trey Benson, I think that he's running back 1 for me in this draft class, but I would be ecstatic if that was the draft class in the sense of, okay, you address a position of need at center, which has been a problem for the Cowboys, just, with how we thought that Tyler Biotish was taking a step forward in 2022, and then 2023, he comes back to reality. And, I mean, ever since Travis Frederick has been gone, I understand, like, it's hard to replace best center in the league type stuff, but if you can get a guy that's top 10, like, that alleviates a lot of pressure on that interior, which has been a struggle for this Cowboys team for a long time. So, I mean, you need to go get your guys, and with that draft scenario, you get a bunch of dudes that can come in and be immediate impact guys, which is exactly what they need.
Yeah, no doubt about it, because then at that point, their whole talk about we want to be better running the football and stopping the run, you get better at both of those immediately. And, let's dive into linebackers here, because that's definitely a position that the Cowboys are going to be targeting in the draft. To me, the guy that I would want them to get is Junior Colson. And here's the reason why. Because I feel like if you get one Peyton Wilson, to me, I am scared of his medicals. I really am. I love the player. I really do. But the medicals scare me. Double digit surgeries at that position, such a physical position,
Mhm.
that scares me. And then my thing with Edrin Cooper is this. I feel like we have Edrin Cooper already. Like, I feel like DeMarvion Overshone is that like Edrin Cooper's DeMarvion Overshone and DeMarvion Overshone's Edrin Cooper. So
Mhm.
I think I think it's two, similar players to me. But I feel like if you add a Junior Colson, who is more of a Mike linebacker, he's there for depth purposes with a Eric Kendricks being like the main guy in that room. But also, like now, if you want to move forward, hopefully Mike Zimmer is the coordinator for years to come, because that means the Cowboys have a really successful season with Mike McCarthy
Right.
and he's still the defensive coordinator. You want a guy like Junior Colson, a guy who's going to be your Mike linebacker, learning under a guy like Eric Kendricks. And, the main point to me is just I love Edrin Cooper. I just feel like we have a guy that's kind of exactly like him in the room
Mhm.
already.
No, I gotcha. I think that defensively, this team needs to do a lot. I really like Junior Colson out of Michigan. I understand people hear the Michigan football program and they think, no, we don't need more Michigan players. Now that just because you have one or two dudes that you might think not that might not pan out, that doesn't mean you don't go there. Like it's just is it how it is. Like that by that same logic, oh, we should draft a center from Wisconsin every single 4 years. Like no, we're not doing that. But what I do think is that yes, I think Junior Colson would be a perfect guy to add long term with this linebacker core that you have, and with Damone Clark, I think and what you mentioned earlier, I think he's played out of position. I think he's more of a will guy, but then. If you add Peyton Wilson, let's just say he falls to you in round two. Like, I mean, fantastic potential. If he didn't have injury concerns, you'd be linebacker one for me. But
First round
no,
pick.
but I think that with Cooper, I am a fan of Edgar Cooper. I wouldn't mind him here in Dallas. I just think that it's going to depend on what Mike Zimmer wants. I've also heard that there's been traction for a guy like Tyler Nubin, which people be like, well, why do we need a safety? I think some people don't understand that the safety play in Dallas has been a bit disappointing, especially last year. Malik Hooker took a step back. I what's his name? Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Wilson.
Donovan
Yeah,
Wilson. Yep.
Donovan Wilson. I'm like, what's his name? Donovan Wilson kind of started playing better down the stretch. I think that when you look at the secondary, I think there is a problem long term. That's why, like, I've been having conversations with people because I know there were some mock drafts where they're like, oh, they're taking corners and safeties in rounds 1 and 2, and I'm like, I'm not opposed to that because when we look at it, you have Jordan Lewis on a 1-year contract. You then have to factor in, okay, what's going to happen with Trevon Diggs? What's going to happen long term with Deron Bland? Like, kind of what I said earlier is that a lot of the depth on this team has been depleted. And so, like, if you have a guy like a Kool-Aid McKinstry or someone like, I know Nate Wiggins, people bring up, I wouldn't mind them here in Dallas either. I just think, a lot of people think, oh, you have Deron Bland, you have Trevon Diggs, you're fine. But in reality, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, do you think they're going to pay two corners that kind of money? And we got to think about how this front office operates. Like, if they decide, hey, Blaine, we want you to play the outside, then, you're going to need a new nickel corner or a slot corner, however you wish to refer to it as. You're going to need that down the road. So I just think that, we don't want to force a pick. Do they need to go offensive line early? Per se, no. I don't think that they need to really go any direction. I just think we don't know how the board's going to fall when you're that far down. I just don't want to be in a situation where if they say we need an offensive lineman, they reach for a guy as opposed to maybe there's a better player like a wide receiver or a corner or maybe a linebacker, but I don't think there's a linebacker that's a first round grade for me this year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I definitely hear what you're saying. Absolutely. Like, I feel like corner is a sneaky need from the standpoint of, like, I would prefer Deron Bland be in the nickel and then find a perimeter guy. I think that would be the best for this team. But it's kind of one of those situations where, like, you're right, they don't like need to take an offensive lineman in the first round because there are going to be centers in the second and third round. You know, like a Cedric Van Pran, a guy like that. And then there's some guards that might be able to move in and play center for you. Um, I would have to talk to more of like the offensive line guru type guy because, Christian Haynes, Christian Mahogany from Boston College. I want to see if they can play center. If not, it is what it is. So maybe that's an option for you. And again, like the reason why I want to go center in the first round is because you win with identity in the NFL. Like I talked about earlier, when things aren't going your way, what do you lean on? And I feel like, this team does have an identity, both on offense and defense. But the problem is, like, it's a volatile identity to where, like, if you lean on, hey, we can run the football effectively. So if Dak's having a rough game in the playoffs, okay, let's hand the ball off here to Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson, and let's run behind Tyler Smith, Jackson Powers Johnson, and Zach Martin. Like, I think Terrence Steele will have a much better season next year. I do. I want to know what happened with Terrence Steele and Tyler Biotic when Mike Solari came in, but that's a story for a different day. But like, I feel like, hey, you get an interior like that, teams are going to have a very hard time rushing the passer through the interior, and you're going to have a much easier time running the football with those three guys. So I agree they don't need to take offensive line because if you don't take offensive, sorry, I'm dealing with a little bit of some allergies here.
No, I'm the same way. Don't worry. You're good.
So, like, I think that, like, okay, you don't take offensive line in the first round. You can move Tyler to left tackle. I'm not for that. I think he should stay at guard. He's an all-pro at guard. Keep him there. But, if like the doomsday scenario happens, you can put him there, put TJ Bass at left guard, draft a center later in the draft. So I do agree with that. I would just prefer if they did that.
No, I got you. I mean, it's like I people that watch me, or I'm speaking for myself here, know that I have said that on the offensive line, the problem is, okay, your depth has now become your starters. Now you got to figure out, okay, what do you want to do? Because when you look at the offensive line as a whole, you most likely they're going to have Tyler Smith out at left tackle, assuming they don't do anything else. You have TJ Bass at left guard which you have 2 more years of control with him with restricted free agency. Same thing with Brock Hoffman, 2 more years of control there. And then you'll have Zach Martin going into the final year of his contract, depending on if he retires or if he wants to come back. We're kind of starting to see him regress a bit from where we was, before. But, I mean, he's still up, like, top 10 in the league for sure. And then you have Terrence Steele. With taking a guard, you are in a situation where it's like, okay, you're protected at right guard as well because you could slide TJ Bass over to right guard. You will have this unnamed guard at left guard. And I'm not saying it has to be first round. Like, you can go get a guy like Cooper Beebe in the later rounds, which I'm a big fan of him. Or you have a couple other names, but he's one of my, I'm like, oh, please, late round type of guy. Or if you really want to go center, you can go center. And, I mean, the big thing is that if you look at it, I mean, you can say this about any position. This is why I'm kind of so annoyed with how the Cowboys have handled things. Is like even at wide receiver. At wide receiver, after this year, Brandon Cooks is most likely gone. You have 1 more year of control of Jalen Tolbert. You have a bunch of other dudes, and then CeeDee Lamb, who you're most likely going to give an extension to. So it's like, this team has a lot of work to do, and it's not going to be addressed fully in this draft. That's where it's like you kind of had to pick and choose your battles. If it were me, go load up the trenches, and we'll call it a day there. But I just think that this, to your point about an identity, I just think that this team's identity isn't set in stone in the sense of, like, what is it that we do well where we're like, that's the Dallas Cowboys. Like, we aren't like a Kyle Shanahan type of offense where his specialty is scheming offensively, being able to run the ball, being able to use motion and all this other crap. defensively we don't really have an identity because it was kind of like we do whatever the hell we want. And when what I like what Mike Zimmer coming in is he's very antiquated with the Cowboys. He's been there for so damn long. It's like, oh, we know who we're working with. Now, what I am worried about is, okay, well, how did the players respond to Mike Zimmer? I mean, they're grown adults. They should be able to respond well. But we don't know how, if he has enough ingredients to get things done. Like we kind of saw when Mike Nolan, I'm not saying it's going to be the same thing like him.
Yeah.
When Mike Nolan came in here, it was kind of like he wanted to do things a certain way, but the defense just it was all over the place. But then you got a guy like Dan Quinn that came in. You saw how much they added on the defensive side of the ball, and you kind of started seeing how things were. I mean, when you had a guy like Micah Parsons, it helps. But with Mike Zimmer, statistically speaking, his defenses have always been top tier. And so I'm really excited to see what he's going to do here in Dallas. I hope he stays long term, but then again, like I don't know what's going to happen in 2024. So,
yeah, no doubt about it. And I would say this though about like the Cowboys' identity. I do think they had an identity. I just don't think that it was a reliable identity, right? Like their identity defensively is let's get turnovers. Well, turnovers come in bunches,
right.
know, and when this team was not getting turnovers, they were a mediocre defense. And there's no reason for it. Dude, that was one of the most talented defenses in football. There's no reason why they should have been as average as they were when they weren't getting turnovers. Like, I get that they lost some linebackers. Hey, guess what? Like, I get that some people had some problems with Rashaan Evans. He's better than what you had. Like, he's way better than anything you had. And, I don't know where you land on the Micah Parsons to linebacker discussion. I felt like he should have played more linebacker this year than what he did. Not saying you take him off the line completely, because then you're just I just don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. But they had a lot more depth at defensive end than they did linebacker. And when Micah Parsons played linebacker, you saw like, man, that dude, if he stays at that position, he's the best in football. Like, I remember the Miami game where he got downhill, he shot a gap, and he had guards trying to put hands on him, and he was just like, I want to pull that play. I'm gonna try and pull that play up because it's just so damn, it's so
crazy.
Damn impressive. But I don't believe he should stick at one position entirely, and I think the fact that they didn't play him more as an off-ball linebacker this past season, I think they should have done that because they were in a panic emergency situation, and they just decided like, hey, let's just play a 210-pound safety as an off-ball linebacker the entire season. So we can play a 210-pound safety at linebacker, but we can't play at defensive end and at a position where we had plenty of depth at it, who played linebacker in college. We can't play him at linebacker.
I mean, like, I'm a Penn State guy. Everybody that knows me knows I'm a Penn State guy, so I'm familiar with who Micah Parsons is and was when he was at Penn State. But, like, what's funny to me is that when they drafted him, they originally drafted him to be an off-ball linebacker. Then we had DeMarcus Lawrence get hurt, so they're like, okay, well, you played edge in college, so why not play him? And you see what you get. I just think the problem was they relied on him too much as an edge, which I'm not saying like, hey, if he's your best pass rusher, then let him do those things. Like, that's fine. My problem is that with what you did with the moves you've done defensively, what happened was that you removed the most important part of your defense, which is having Micah Parsons as a chess piece. Having him where you can play him at all these different positions, particularly linebacker, off-ball, and as an edge. And now you have teams that are scheming against him, not because that Micah is like, there's a solution to him, which, oh, you could just run the ball at him or you go at him. It's because, dude, he's being double and triple teamed. And, of course, we talk about how the officiate, unfortunately, it's true. Like, he's not getting holding calls when he should be getting holding calls. But you have no one else helping him, like, not on the defensive line. I mean, you saw guys like Dorrance Armstrong do well, and other guys feast when Micah Parsons was holding them other dudes back.
Yeah.
But at linebacker, if you don't have those big bodies and Micah Parsons is filling up three gaps because people are trying to block him, and you have no one behind him, for coverage, of course it's going to be a problem. And that's something that the Cowboys struggled with mightily last year. And that's why I'm like, why did they not go get a linebacker? And I'm not saying go get any linebacker. Like, I know we had the sweepstakes for Shaq Leonard and then you also had, you brought in Rashaan Evans, but I'm like, where, like, you did nothing to address this position, and that goes all the way back to when we started, is that the Cowboys just fail to understand, you have something that's a problem here, you need to fix it. And that's just, oh my God, it's so irritating.
And let me just say this. Maybe they could have used a 4th-round draft pick to go get a decent linebacker. Oh, wait, they used that on Trey Lance. I still, to this day, hate that trade. And it's so funny, like, because I made a TikTok about it at the time, and I got so much crap for it. And I just said, I hate this trade. You're going to get more out of that 4th-round pick than you're going to get out of Trey Lance. People are like, they're going to use it and get a better pick out of it. And I'm like, no, they're not, because the only team that was offering a 4th-round pick was Dallas. And the only reason why they offered a 4th-round pick was because they didn't have a 5th-round pick. Teams were offering the Niners 6th-round draft picks for Trey Lance. And then Dallas was like, oh, we'll just trade a 4th-round pick for him. And now you're seeing that it's a gigantic pain in the behind that trade.
Right, and like for me, like I was like I think with the 4th-round pick they had, I would have been fine if they took a guy like Aiden O'Connell. But like again, I don't have a problem with them taking a quarterback. I'm not saying that's what you're insinuating. I just think the return on investment is what's important. And like, look, of course, you shouldn't look if we're seeing Trey Lance play quarterback. It like something terrible must have happened, but. The thing is that you should be preparing for the worst case scenario. That's what good teams do. For Dallas, I don't think that's what they were doing. I think that they had in the back of their mind, like, hey, if this dude can pan out and we just don't work out with Dak a contract extension, maybe we have the next guy, which, again, I think is a bit asinine because you have no... like, nothing on this dude in a Dallas uniform. He's had no playing time. We'll see what happens in preseason. But if you end up being in a situation where he just walks next year, that being Trey Lance, you basically traded a 4th-round pick for 2 years of a QB3, which is just stupid because if it were me, if you drafted Aiden O'Connell, then we're probably having a discussion, okay, does Aiden O'Connell take the next step to be QB2? But now, with Trey Lance, okay, you didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Let's just, go down this weird, wacky scenario that the Cowboys don't pay Dak. Okay, you have a $40 million cap hit in 2025, which would be the largest in NFL and Cowboys history, of course. Then you would have a $12 million cap hit the following year. And then, here's the thing, you would still have to pay Trey Lance, and by the way, that's not going to be cheap. You think that his agent's going to be like, hey, we'll give you a cheap contract. No, his agent's most likely going to be like, yo, if you want this dude to be the starting Cowboys quarterback, he's going to need to get paid at least $10 million. That's where it's going to start. That's just what the nature of the business is.
It's going to be a 1-year contract, too.
Right.
Because they're going to be like, hey, look, we want to bet on ourselves because if we go out there and we have like a Jordan Love type of year, to where you see some promise in the guy, then they're going to be like, all right, you got to sign us for 50.
And you're just back to square one.
You're back to where you started with a quarterback who's probably not going to be as good.
Right, and I mean, hey, if they want to play that type of Russian roulette, be my guest. But to me, like, I think that this is where, a lot of Cowboys fans don't understand the conversation of how the quarterback market works and also what teams do is that smart teams recognize the type of guy you have and you build around him. Like, I don't think Dak Prescott is going to carry you single-handedly to a championship. Obviously, he's going to need help. like many other dudes in this league. But
Like every quarterback.
like every other quarterback, right? Except if you're Patrick Mahomes, basically. And even with that, Patrick Mahomes basically had his defense help him out when they were struggling offensively at certain aspects of their postseason run. But my thing is look, if they are not willing, like the Cowboys seem to be the only team that has it opposite, where it's like, hey, we need to take weapons and stuff away from you in order for us to justify paying you, which is ridiculous because we're talking about a dude when you gave him the weapons, he was an MVP runner-up and he threw the most touchdown like he basically made 2022 look like an anomaly. Of course, we knew it was an anomaly, and he showed who he really is. And you're telling me you want to get rid of that because you have like, oh, but space, it's all about the playoffs. No shit. I get that. It's all about the playoffs, but you're going to tell me that, oh, like if it's what have you done for me recently? You know, people want to talk about these other 49ers games from 3 years ago and stuff like that, which I'm not trying to dismiss the poor performances. Of course, he didn't play well. But, like, bro, like, we got 48 points dunked on us at home. And you're telling me, like, we're down 20. Even when he threw the pick six, you're down 20 goddamn points. And you're asking this dude to be like, please save us because, like, no, that's not how this works, man. It's always something with this team. And it's like, even if Dak played a perfect game, I don't even think they win that game either. It's just crazy to me. Like, again, I'm not trying to act like we need to pay him. Like, I've said I'm okay with whatever the team wants to do. I'm just trying to be realistic and say, yo, if you really want to just let this play out, okay? Again, even if you find the next guy, you're going to be in the same situation you're in. It's just a matter of when, and it's going to be a lot more money. Again, like, and also this core is not in, like, I don't know. I just think that the core itself is not ready to rebuild. You're not at that point yet. That's just my opinion. I think that, but again, if the Cowboys, this is what just doesn't click in my head, and I'll let you go. I'm sorry if I'm being a bit long-winded here.
No. You're good. You're good.
What I don't understand is that if Dak Prescott's trash and he's terrible in the postseason, why would you think we're gonna get any return on investment for him if you want the Cowboys to trade for him? And he has a no trade clause. No, you can make it work. I mean, Russell Wilson had a no trade clause. You can make a trade work. The problem is this Cowboys team doesn't understand how to do that. And I know that they would be fleeced. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they traded Dak Prescott. We only get like a second-round pick in return. Like that's how stupid they are. But, yeah, I just think that it's ridiculous how they're handling this. And they're going to act like that we're going to be in a much better spot.
Well, here's the thing. And what I'm about to say might sound crazy at its face.
No, go for it.
It's going to make a lot of sense. So my thing when it comes to what's up, WWE guy, appreciate you for coming out. Dak Prescott is a very smart guy. He's not going to say, hey, I'm going to waive my no trade clause and trade me to a team and get 2 first-round draft picks. You want to know why that's not going to happen? Because then you're taking away the most premium asset that a team has in back-to-back years. If Dak's going to waive his no trade clause, he's going to, if I'm the Cowboys and I really want to move on from him, I want to make sure that we're not, I don't know if they traded him, what the dead cap money would be and all that other stuff. I'm just, speaking or thinking out loud here. I would trade him if you really want to move on from him that bad for a 3rd-round pick, not because I think that that's what he's worth. I think it's because he's not going to say yes to going to a team where they're going to trade 2 first-round draft picks and premium assets.
Boom. And that's a fantastic point because if we remember what happened with Derek Carr. Derek Carr was supposed to be traded, I think, for a 2nd or 3rd round pick, and he ended up saying, "No, I don't want to go to New Orleans." Not because now here's the thing, he was trying to call their bluff. He said, "No, if you don't want me, then cut me because I'm not I don't want to go there." And they cut him, and he still goes there anyway because he didn't want them to lose the draft capital. And I completely agree with what you're saying. If we look at it from the flip side, from Dak and Todd Francis' perspective, hey, aren't you going to try and do something for your client? There's no reason for them to do anything. When you're in negotiations, you don't want to be the first person that goes through and says, this is what we want. That's exactly why when Dak was kind of frustrated, it looked like they didn't give him an offer. Number one, it's just out of sign of respect. Like, wouldn't you want to try and work out a deal? But that's besides the point. Todd France isn't going to go to the Cowboys and be like, hey, we're ready to... Like, no, the Cowboys have to go to his representation and say, hey, we're ready to work on an extension. And for Todd France, there's no benefit to just sit there and be like, hey, we're ready to go. Because I think what's going to end up happening is that if they don't work out an extension before training camp, he'll odds are hit free agency. He has a no trade clause. He has a no tag clause. So the Cowboys are basically going to watch him at the open market and go somewhere else and get a third round comp pick, which if Dak really, like, say he wants to be out of here, what he could do is, like you're saying, he can either force a trade but say, if you're going to trade me, I'm not going here if you're going to trade. Like, again, he can do that. He has the cards to do that, ladies and gentlemen. But I think that the other part, and the other, like, also Stephen Jones is a POS because he doesn't want to talk to Todd France. No, like, Dak can easily just be like, no, I'm going to gamble on myself like I did years ago, and I'll do very well. And then whatever happens, and I'll just go somewhere else. And he'll win big somewhere else. And then we're like, well, shit. Like, we just let another guy go win a championship elsewhere. It's just the Cowboy way.
Yeah. Now, I do think that a deal gets done between those two. I really do. I think Dak is going to sign with Dallas long term. But here's the thing. I don't feel as confident as I once did. And I thought that they were going to get a deal done with him before free agency. But, what I wonder is, are you big on, like, tracking the cap?
Yes.
So my question to you would be this. If they sign him, would they maybe be able to lower his cap hit maybe by like $8 million?
Oh, it's huge. It would be huge.
Front load the contract, get the big cap hit out of the way this year.
Yes.
And then, because that's what I would do. Like, if you're going to re-sign, here's the thing. If you wanted to keep CeeDee Lamb at the number that he's at, if you wanted to keep Dak at the number he's at and still extend them, I'm fine with that, because then at that point there's direction. But right now it's just like, dude, like, okay, I do not understand the Dak Prescott thing. I don't understand anything with the way they're handling that. I specifically don't see what the hell they're doing with CeeDee Lamb, because CeeDee Lamb he's a top 3 receiver in football. It's Justin Jefferson, it's Tyreek Hill, and then it's CeeDee Lamb. Well, are you waiting for Justin Jefferson to reset the market? Are you waiting for Jamar Chase to reset the market? Like, at least with Dak, the quarterback market, there's nobody that's going to get paid big money this offseason. Maybe Trevor Lawrence, but that's even still a maybe. And I think Jacksonville's going to wait it out with Trevor Lawrence. I think they're going to, I think Trevor Lawrence is really damn good. I think people are getting on him for that last season. I watch a lot of tape on quarterbacks, and I thought Trevor Lawrence was way better than people gave him credit for. But that's besides the point. I think Jacksonville is going to wait another season to get an extension done with him. But, hey, I would have loved if the Cowboys would have been like, all right, after that San Francisco game, I know Dak didn't play well, and I'm going to have another hot take that's not a hot take about that game after this statement. Hey, there's a bunch of quarterbacks that are about to get paid. Let's do this deal right after the San Francisco game. And now you have them for $50 million. Now the price just went up. And my hot take that's not a hot take about that San Francisco game, Dak didn't choke in that game. They just played a really good team, and they were overmatched.
Which one, the second one or the first one?
The second one.
Oh, I agree with that. I think the second one, like, I understand that he threw the 2 interceptions, but if you look at how that game went, I mean, if we had a second offensive option outside of Lamb, like, and you can maybe even say Dalton Schultz, we would be fine. But now, to that point, when we talk about the cap, like, yes, the longer that the deal is, the more beneficial it is to the Cowboys. But again, like, we're talking about if a team is competent to make those moves. Typically, what a lot of teams like to do, like, I'll use the Eagles as an example because they're in our division, and we kind of saw what they did this year. There are mechanisms that teams can use to lower cap hits, go sign guys, all that other stuff. Restructures, extensions, cutting people, whatever, trading. what Howie Roseman does a great job of is manipulating the salary cap. And the thing is that when you start moving mechanisms around, you have to continuously do it. So when we talk about like a dead money hit, that you can negate assuming you don't sign someone. And this is kind of where I get irritated with how the Cowboys handle things. With Tyron Smith, I believe right now his cap hits around $6 or $9 million with the Jets, okay? You're paying $6 million because you touched his contract so much for him to play elsewhere. So in reality, if you look at how the salary cap works, you would have just had to pay him an additional $3 million against the cap to keep him here. With Ezekiel Elliott, again, you're paying him $6 million, and he's not played on the team for now going on 2 years for him not to be here. And then you had other situations like Jalen Smith, I think La'el Collins, all these other dudes. I mean, look, I'm not saying, like, don't release dudes that aren't up to the contract. Of course, that's going to happen in this league. But if you extend Dak Prescott, that $50 million cap hit you have this year will lower that will lower by $20 or $30 million. And you can move the money however you want. So that $40 million cap hit, that $12 million cap hit that I referenced a lot earlier when we were talking, that goes away when you sign him. And so that's where I don't understand this team, is that they want to talk about, oh, we want to have the ability to roll over money from this year to this year. Dude, you don't save enough money in rollover money to justify, hey, we're going to sign this dude later. Like, that's not a thing. Like, and it's the same thing, like, with a couple of these other dudes. Like, with Lamb, I agree with you. There's no point in waiting. Like, right now, I think his cap hits $17 million or something ridiculous like that. Not that it's, like, ridiculous, because we know how ridiculous these contracts can get, but also another key thing, and just so everybody understands, just because we say that someone is worth $30 million a year or $50 million a year, that's not how it's going to look on a salary cap sheet.
No.
Like, Dak Prescott, this is the first time since Dak Prescott got franchise tag where he had over, like, a $30 million cap hit. And that cap hit is not on Dak Prescott. That is on the team. It is on the team to mitigate that. If they wanted to, they could have restructured his contract and pushed the money back if they were truly had the intention of re-signing him, which I do think he will be re-signed. I think that's going to happen. But I think that at the end of the day, they need to recognize, like, okay, you have also a Micah Parsons coming down the road. Do you want to pay him? Like, and again, this is where a lot of the good teams think, and they say, look, if you're saying, yes, I want to have this dude on my team, I'm okay with paying him, get it done. If you, like, let's just use Parsons as an example. If you feel like I don't want to pay $40 million a year or, like, $50 million a year for a dude that's an edge, like, I don't want to do that, let's just say, then go find that value elsewhere, bro. Someone will pay that money. And that's where I hate how this team works, because they wait till the last minute to do shit, and then they want to act like what was it? Like when Steven talks about, like, oh, well, we got to save up all this money for these contracts coming down the road. It's like, bro, you don't even sign your own dudes when you need to sign your own dudes.
I know. Like, it's so ridiculous. I had a great question that I was going to ask, and I just, for some reason, just completely forgot about it.
You'll come back to you.
Yeah, I think it will as well. Yeah, that's just a big problem of mine. It really is, because, I mean, at the end of the day, this team does draft well. Like, this isn't, I'm not trying to take shots at them because, just because they're our rivals, but Philly does not draft as well as Dallas does. They just don't. And when you draft well, you can't play as much in free agency because of the fact that, hey, we got to re-sign these guys that are going to demand market resetting contracts. Like, when I look at Philly's team, I don't see anybody outside of AJ Brown worth resetting the market for, but on Dallas, I see 3 guys that are worth resetting the market for. And that's Dak, that's CD, and that's Micah. And then soon it's going to be Tyler Smith. But, they can work all these things out. Like, is it going to take a little more work? Yeah. That's what they get paid to do. Like, that's what these capologists get paid to do. Like, they can make this work out. They can sign Micah, they can
Mhm.
sign Dak, and they can sign CeeDee Lamb. I think they have like $100 million in cap space for next season. Like,
Yeah.
they're not paying anybody. They're not paying
Like,
anybody.
like you're not doing anything, bro. And here's the thing: is like you look at Philly, they have like the fourth highest paid quarterback, they have like the fourth highest paid wide receiver, they have like all these high paid guys, and people want to act like we can't pay these dudes. Like, I'm not saying like paying or not paying is the issue. Like, if they wanted to, they can afford paying these dudes, but that's where I try to tell people, don't throw your energy at the players, throw it at the front office. They're the ones that are ultimately saying, we want you here, here's your money. If you're saying we don't, if you're someone that is anti-Dak or anti-player here or there, I'm not getting mad that the player's like, hey, I want to be here, I want my money. I would get mad at the front office, because the front office is the one that makes these decisions. Like, I hate it when they're so two-faced. Like, they want to act like, oh, we can't do moves because we have to re-sign our own guys. That's just what our philosophy is, whatever. But then when the time comes to pay your dudes, you want to go through the media, drag these dudes through the mud, and then you want to try and win the deal. Like, we've seen this over the past decade, this being a thing. Des Bryant went through this. It took him until training camp at the very end of that deadline with the franchise tag to sign him. You also saw situations with DeMarcus Lawrence, Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott, and a couple other dudes. Like, I mean, sure, you have a couple other dudes that jump in line to get paid. I mean, but that's the problem with this team. You give out extensions too early to some people that don't deserve these extensions, or you can wait on. Like with Jalen Smith, you basically had like 2 years of film on this dude, and you gave him like a ridiculous contract. Like, that, what? Like, that's not how this works, man. And that's where this team has, like, that's why I'm so worried, like, about this team. Like if they want to say we want to go to back to quarterback roulette, fine. But I'm just saying, like, you people don't realize, like, they have an eye for certain quarterbacks where you might want to be like, maybe I would rather just stick with Dak Prescott. Like, you know, they're talking about guys like Johnny Manziel, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones. Like, these are dudes that or Paxton Lynch. These were dudes that they were interested in. And that's Will McClay in the scouting department, which I sometimes think Will McClay hides behind Stephen Jones, where if he makes a fault in his draft evaluation.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Like,
So,
yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Finish.
No, go ahead. I'm done. Like, go ahead.
So this was the question. When it comes to the left tackle situation, I think this is personally how they should handle it.
Okay.
If they don't end up with, a premium guy in the first 3 rounds or a premium pick at left tackle, draft a guy in the later rounds, maybe like 5th round, something like that. You have Awesome Richards on the roster. You have Chuma Edoga. Go sign another guy, like maybe like a David Bakhtiari, see if that could be a thing. You have some guys on your practice squad that are young that you feel good about, Earl Bostic. And I just say, hey, look, we have 6 guys. Somebody show us that you are a capable NFL left tackle. And then at that point, the offensive line outside of left tackle, I feel good about. I just look at it and I say, hey, look, the center position has been something we've been missing on this offensive line. Let's add that dynamic to our offensive line, and then just throw a bunch of bodies at left tackle. Somebody win the job. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. There's a guy in my comment section. I want to say it was, I think it was John Linder. I think that I apologize if you're watching this on the VOD and I pronounce your name wrong, but someone in the comment section mentioned getting David Bakhtiari as a possible option at left tackle, and I'm all in favor of that. I think that if we're talking about how the offensive line is currently constructed, you really need, and you're trying to do an all-in, I wouldn't be upset with that. I understand that he's had some injury concerns, but again, I'm not asking for this dude to be my left tackle long-term. I'm just asking for him to be, 1 year, which, to be honest with you, I would have rather just brought Tyron Smith back, and I would have been fine with that. But here we are. So, yeah, I think that with Tyler Smith, look, he will be good wherever he goes. He's continuously getting better. I'm not a fan of playing musical chairs with any of my guys. I would rather them just stay where they're at and call it how I see it. But this is how I would look at it to answer your point. If you want to move Tyler Smith, you need to make a conscious decision as a team. Either if you're going to move him again, this has to be the last time you're moving him. Like, you can't just keep going back and forth. To me, I think that he's grown, and I said this when we drafted him. I felt like he had the potential to be an amazing guard. I don't know about being a tackle, but he kind of proved me wrong there. I don't think he would be, I'm not saying he would be bad at tackle, but I understand your sentiment of like, hey, like, I think that he's more suited to play guard at the NFL level than tackle, and here we are. And I think that if you can't answer the left tackle equation this year, go get a guy that can fill in the role for maybe a year or two. Then you can draft a dude next year. And then you can address center, let's just say. Like, you can address center. Or, I don't know, you can draft a guard later on in the draft to replace Zach Martin next year. I don't know. Like, or I don't know how they want to go about this, but what I do know is I love how they talk about position flex, and that usually tells me, like, they're going to kind of wing this shit, and we're not going to figure this out until, like, after the draft, you know, whoever they take.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And, you know, I do think that left guard is where Tyler Smith should be playing. Like, I just don't agree with kicking him out. And I'm going to be honest with you, man. Last thing I'll say here before we end up on the live. The Terrence Steele injury in 2022 was so devastating because, man, if you had an offensive line with Tyron Smith at left tackle, Tyler at guard, Tyler Biotic at center, Martin and Steele with the way Steele was playing, dude, and Tony Pollard stays healthy, I think you could have won that San Francisco game, and I think you could have beat Philly. I mean, that year, I get it, Philly was really good, but Dallas, I think they would have beat them in that game if they were as healthy as Philly was, but obviously it's the NFL. And of course, you know, like, the only team that season who had, like, the best injury luck was Philly, and they ran away to the Super Bowl with it. And I just start to think, like, man, if we were that healthy, you know, it makes me think, man.
I mean, it's weird because they kind of solved the Tyron Smith equation this year. Like, they gave him rest. They're like, oh, that's now they want to pull the plug. I mean, like, look, I'm not gonna, like, be two-faced about it. Like, yeah, I felt like they needed to go get a replacement for him. There's no question about that. But, like, when you find a solution to the problem, you don't just go out there and be like, yeah, no, especially because it's like they want to act like they were far apart financially. But when you look at the deal he got from the Jets, I mean, like, it's literally. But nah, man, I think here's the thing. Like, do I think this offensive line is terrible? And again, I'm not insinuating anyone here is saying that it's terrible. No, I think that the Cowboys have an above average offensive line, which in this NFL is something that you covet. I think that they have a guy at right tackle that's still getting his feet back under him. Right guard, you still have a fantastic right guard. You know, is he best in the league? Probably not. But again, that's just because of how when you get older, certain things change. At center, I think you have a solid center in Brock Hoffman, given with what I've seen on film with him in college and at the NFL level. I think that you have a solid left guard, which again, if you can get two starters in undrafted free agency, which is something I've been screaming at the mountaintops for, is get dudes not in the first round to be solid starters for you, you're set. And then you have a left tackle in Tyler Smith who's rising and getting constantly better, and he's just turning, 22 years old, 23? Like, that's crazy to me. So I think that while if you were to tell me, Space, if the offensive line is Smith, Bass, Hoffman, Martin, and Steele, I think that's still a good offensive line relative to the rest of the league. But can you get better? Sure, you can. I just don't want them to be like, hey, we need to take a left tackle because we lost Tyron Smith. Like, you don't need to take a left tackle because you lost Tyron Smith. I think you just need to, like, and this is what we kind of talked about years ago when we kept taking first-round picks with offensive linemen, because that's like the old, like, the best way of getting the best player available. But it's like, to me, you know, an offensive lineman pick, depending on when it is and how good the player is, sometimes tells me, like, hey, we kind of maybe we just don't like anybody else, but we don't want to trade down, so we'll just take this guy, which I'm like, stop doing that. But nah, that's why I'm a fan of like a guy like Cooper Beebe. Like if your ultimate plan is to take a guard, I think you can get a quality guard later in the draft. You don't have to take him that early. Like, but that's where I stand on that. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And hey, look, if they get David Bakhtiari, just give him the Tyron Smith treatment from last year.
I mean, you got it. Yeah, like, dude, like it worked. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I mean, and it also kind of reinforces, like, hey, look, where I'll be upset is if they take a guy like Tyler Guyton and they're gonna say that he's gonna play left tackle. I'm like, Dak, dude, I'm praying for you, but but this is something I would keep an eye out on, is that if they do take a guy like that plays on the right side, and they say, well, our indication is he can play both. That's a red flag to Terrence Steele, because that tells me like maybe this pick isn't to replace Tyron, it's to replace Terrence Steele, which is a possibility. They never touched his contract. He has an out next offseason.
Yep.
So, but nah, man, I don't want to play a dude that played on the right side, put him on the left side, and like fingers crossed it'll work out. Like, no, I'm not doing that in an all-in year, which all in, like, dude, it's run it back. You're running the team back, which in other sports that can work. In football, when you run it back, dude, you can't run it back fully. Like, dude, you can't.
Well, in the words of Skip Bayless, it's all in, comma.
Comma. The strongest comment in like Twitter history. Like, he's like, oh my god, dude, can you imagine if you forgot to put a comment there? That would have been so funny.
Yo, and then there were like pictures covering up the comma, and it's just, dude, the memes that were created with that tweet, like just all the replies, all in, comma, like
comma.
It's like the Spider-Man's being like the comma,
just like pointing.
So it's, the only thing that the Cowboys were all in this year were all in Skip's ass. That's all they were.
Comma. Dude, oh my god, I could go on a whole rant on Skip Bayless, but nah, man, I look, the draft's probably going to be the highlight of this offseason, and I don't say that with certainty because I've said this several times in the mock drafts that I do, and I know a lot of people who watch my mock drafts, they're like, why are you taking this dude? Like, I'm like, well, I'm trying to brace you for some of these names, like a Graham Barton. But I remember when Graham Barton was an unpopular pick, and then people are now on the train. I've been hearing, with the people I've talked with behind the scenes, Tyler Guyton is a guy to keep an eye out on draft night if things kind of are continuing to trend the way they are. Jonathan Brooks for sure in round 2. I don't think he'll be there, honestly. I think he'll go earlier, just kind of seeing how things went with Detroit last year and kind of seeing how these running backs are performing. I think that there's going to be a bit of a return to value at the running back position. I'm trying to think. There was another name that was floated around to keep an eye on. I think. If
not, I'm cool. If Trey Benson's there, I'm cool with that.
Oh, yeah, me too. I think he's running back 1 for me in this class. So I forget the other name that I was hearing on the back channels, but it's definitely offensive lineman early from what I understand, which, depending on the offensive lineman, you better have a good explanation for yourself. Like, I think that's what worries me is the like, also we got to factor in, like, there's, like, when we do the mock drafts, the mock draft simulator goes with the best value pick, but some people don't realize that teams draft shitty. So, like, you're going to have teams that are pushing certain players down the board. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Jackson Powers-Johnson goes in the middle of the first round. Like, sometimes teams be doing that. I'm not saying that would be a bad pick, but I'm just saying, like, I remember last year when Jahmyr Gibbs was being looked, or even Bijan was being looked at, like, oh, these dudes can make it to the Cowboys pick, and these dudes are going in the teens and top 10. Fantastic players, but, what can you do?
So, funny thing, right?
Yeah.
Tom Downey the other day was asked a question. Would you rather listen to a podcast with Craig Carton and Mad Dog Russo, or about the Cowboys,
Oh my
or
god.
or a political podcast with Hannity and Don Lemon. What's your
Holy.
answer to that? Because I
Um,
don't know what I don't know what I would
I
say.
well, for those that don't know, I actually went to school for political science, and that's my degree. And honestly, I think with politics, you can have many different discussions. With the Cowboys, like I feel like it would just get so annoying just because of how the, like I think the Cowboys just do it themselves. You know, where it's like you just watch them. I would rather have that political conversation. I think that would be fucking amazing.
Oh
like,
yeah, because they just like yell at each other like. Russo and Carton would like agree. So dude, Russo, I love Mad Dog Russo, but I
oh,
honestly
I
think he has
hate Mad Dog because
he has
I'm
no idea what he's talking
oh
about.
yeah. Real quick, I need to shout out Army Mom had the BYU guy Kingsley. So Kings,
Suamatia.
yeah, he's another name that's been sneaking up draft boards, and I've
I
been that
like
was
him.
I like him too. I think if you're gonna take a dude that no one's like, who the hell is this guy? That he would be fantastic at left tackle for the Cowboys. So thank you, Army Mom, for that name. I was like, there was another dude on the offensive line. I'm like, it's escaping my head. But nah, man. Yeah, I think. Oh my god, like Mad Dog Russo just gets because I'm a baseball guy most of the time. You know,
Oh,
when the Cowboys
I,
aren't playing, so like whenever his takes are so terrible, and like I just think he's like diet. Skip Bayless or like Wish or Timu Skip Bayless.
well, what
like
cracks me up about him is like he'll argue basketball with JJ Redick, and he'll look like he's winning to like the average casual viewer, but he's not. He's just yelling louder than him. But
yeah,
he's so dug in on his takes, and I
it's
kind of
unbelievable.
respect it. You know what I'm saying? Because in I kind of respect it, and his voice is hilarious, and some of the segments that you get from him are so outrageous and hilarious, and you're right, he is like Skip Bayless, but I don't think he's an ass. I think Skip Bayless is an asshole.
Oh,
I don't think
I
Mad
think
Dog
Skip
Russo
Bayless is
is.
worse. I think
Yeah.
Skip Bayless is worse. Like, trust me, I'm not saying Russo is worse than Skip. I'm talking like if we're talking about like all things considered, Skip Bayless is like
Morning, guys.
as a trash person. Like anybody that knows him knows he's a trash person. In the
And dude, I wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning yesterday because I went to sleep pretty early, and I ended up going back to sleep. But I wake up at 2 o'clock and I go on my Instagram, and it's Skip Bayless. There's a video of Skip Bayless, and he's like, "Oh, there goes LeBron crying again in the last 9 minutes of the basketball game."
oh
It's
my
just
god.
like, dude, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Why is a video of Skip Bayless complaining about LeBron James on
Dude,
my timeline?
Dude, it's so funny. He picks the Lakers to beat, like, not to get on in a basketball discussion, but like he picks the Lakers to beat the Nuggets in 6 or something, and then like, so he could be like, well, I expected LeBron to carry the Lakers all the way to the finals, like, and he's such a hater on LeBron. It's just so funny. like people listen. People want to talk about how Stephen A. Smith hates the Cowboys, bro. If you've listened to how Skip Bayless talks about LeBron James, it's the funniest shit ever. Like, oh, like there was. Oh my god, I forget, there was a clip from years ago when he was on the Miami Heat, and it was the funniest shit. Like, like again, it's entertainment. It's not even like taking the take seriously. It's just how stupid. Like again, if you watch these talk shows as entertainment, which they are, you won't get as big of a headache. Even though I kind of hated how people like there are dudes in this space that just say shit to say shit, and people know who I'm talking about, but.
The people that annoy me the most are the ones that like think that are like, oh, like when they're like LaShawn McCoy and Joy Taylor. Like LaShawn McCoy was like, when you got the star, people overrate who you are. And then Joy
I'm
Taylor was
like,
like, say that again. And it's
I'm like, bro, shut up. Like,
I'm like, overrate. Like, Dak Prescott is a top 7 quarterback in football. I watch a lot of quarterbacks on tape. He had the cleanest tape of all last season. And people will sit there and tell you he's barely even top 15. There are literally people who tell you that.
You know,
say that he's overrated.
bro, like there was a guy that was like commenting like on a video I made 2 years ago when I was like, you know, how Skip Bayless and Emmanuel Acho were like ruining sports media because the only reason they're in sports media is because they played the sport. and didn't go to journalism school to do basic research and actually how to like go into this role. And again, I'm not saying that you have to go to school to do this. I'm just saying they don't have experience doing this. Maybe besides Acho, but like someone was like, well, by that logic, then anybody that goes on radio shouldn't talk. I'm like, no, because whenever you talk about these other people that go on radio, which not everyone on radio is perfect, trust me, I have my grievances with people, everybody, but with LaShawn McCoy, the only reason he has a job is because he played the sport. When we talk about, not to cut you off, I'm sorry. When you talk about Emmanuel Acho, the only reason he's in this is, number one, he played the sport and he got experience. But then you talk about other dudes like, Skip Bayless, who went to school for this, even though, or he's been experienced with this, even though I'm not a fan of him. Stephen A. Smith, this is something he's been tenured in. Like, there are dudes, like even people on YouTube, honestly, that do a much better job because they have no agenda to adhere to. Like, they don't have to make a ridiculous take. Like, we aren't paid to make ridiculous takes, right? Like, unless like you're just the engagement farmer, like some people on Twitter be doing.
Like a guy with the name that starts with E.
I guess I guess that's what we're going with. Like, yeah.
Well, what I love is like the LaShawn McCoy. Like whenever I go at LaShawn McCoy, people are like, "Oh, what do you know? He played NFL football," and I'm like, "Okay, just because he plays NFL, do you see some of like the NFL players, like top 5 quarterbacks or top 5 receiver lists? Like CeeDee Lamb, I think put Wan'Dale Robinson at 5, and it's like, okay, CeeDee Lamb is a great player. I do not agree with that take. Don't agree with it. Nobody agrees with it.
I'm like, what the hell? But nah, man. I think that this has just been such an insane offseason with the amount of, like, I don't know what the contract details of the Royce Freeman deal. It's probably like a 1 year, $1 million, whatever the hell. But like this Cowboys team would have spent like maybe $12 to $15 million, like depending on what the numbers are for Royce Freeman. Like that's how much money they spent on this team, $11 million, and for context, I'm pretty sure the Chargers are still second to last, and they've spent $41 million. Like, we're talking about a $30 million difference. That's like the difference between like a Dak extension. Or if you want to talk about, we can use all this money to go get 5 other players. Like, that's like 6 decent starters that you can spend that money on. And again, it's just... By the way, that spending is not external. That's like total spending. Your players,
which is insane. Like Jordan Lewis and all those guys.
Like, dude, you're paying. Hold on, I had the number in front of me. You're playing like no offense to CJ Goodwin. I think that he's a special teams ace and he's been. You're paying this dude, like if he gets all of his metrics and gets paid fully, $3.7 million. You're paying this dude $3.7 million, but you didn't want to give Zach Moss $3 million. Bro, it's too rich for our blood. It's too expensive, bro. You didn't want to pay Jonathan Hankins $2 million, for 1 year. Like it's not like it's gonna kill you for like 1 year, bro.
No, it's not. I feel like if we had clarity, we wouldn't be this pissed off. But we have
no
clarity. There's no, and I understand the front office, like, we don't have to let our fans know what we're doing. And I'm like, okay, I get that, but like, at least show us with your actions what you're doing, because you're not like, if this team wanted to rebuild, I don't think the fan base would be that, like, obviously there would be people that would be frustrated. I think myself included, because they're not far away at all. They just needed to add a few pieces and, get a new coach, and I think that you're at where you needed to be at. But like, everybody's just frustrated about the fact that there's no clarity. And are you rebuilding? Are you going? Are you trying to go win this thing? It's
right.
That's the problem. But yeah, my friend, it was great getting on, hopping on a live with you. Like I said earlier, the last time we talked was when we felt good about this team, and man, did that just come crashing down.
Just like, it was like we were at that Lions game, we were thinking, oh my god, like things, like we thought things were going our way luck wise. We put Jimmy Johnson in the Ring of Honor, we finally get this hex off this team. Nope. I think that opened a lot of eyes. Like, we were like, hey, we put Jimmy Johnson in the Ring of Honor, and it still didn't do shit. So I thought that was pretty funny. But nah, I mean, it was great talking with you. It's been a while. I know we were meaning to do it, scheduling and stuff like that. But hey, we have the NFL draft this week, and fingers crossed they don't screw it up. But yeah.
Yeah, let's do it again soon, my friend.
For sure, absolutely.
Absolutely. And thank you for everybody coming out. Chris Johns, I just saw your comment there. Thank you for